just about breaking outside your norm and reconnecting with each other. And hopefully you're living so it's not reconnecting, it's just building upon that connection with each other.
I think that my favorite way to describe intentional marriage is you didn't accidentally get married. So why
Yeah.
accidentally live through marriage?
Yeah.
So that's the intentional. Do it on purpose.
Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. Delighted to be joined today all the way from Casper, Wyoming. We have life and marriage coaches at Deviation by Design. These are the people who are going to help you find your happily ever after. Welcome to the show, Justin and Cresta. Burt, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hi.
Yeah, fantastic to have you, and I know we've had a conversation and things before this, but I can't wait to get into what it is you do, who you help, and how you help them. But before we do that, could you just give us a little bit of background about your story so far? You know, what got you to where you are today? Because I know from previous chats this isn't what you've always done.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So my experience with life coaching and coaching in general really started back when I was a teenager. I always had mentors. I was always mentoring people, and it was just kind of the way I was brought up. I got my first life coach when I was actually going through my divorce. And what I noticed with the life coach is it really changed my perspective on life. It really helped me get through things. It really just challenged my way of thinking. And very quickly, once Cresta and I started dating, I'd let her know. I was like, this is something I want to do. This is something I want to pursue.
Right.
I've had a background. I was a missionary for a while in Indonesia. I have a background in law enforcement. That's actually how we met. She was a dispatcher and I was out on the street. And but I let her know early in our relationship that this is something I wanted to do. And she to my surprise was very quickly on board and excited about it. And we eventually got started with it.
Yep. So I did not grow up with a lot of mentorship, coaching, anything. I kind of got into the field of helping people when I started 911 dispatching in here in Casper. That's again where Justin and I met. He was an officer. I was in a little locked up dark room,
Right.
telling him where to go. We didn't start dating until after both of us were out of law enforcement.
Right.
But yeah, he had told me about his coaching experience, and it was inspirational.
Right.
So I would say he's probably been my life coach.
Right.
and inspired me with some of the stuff that he's learned. I've seen how it's helped our relationship, and I just feel like I want to share that with people.
Oh, wonderful. There's a couple of notes I've put down here, you know, just to follow up in a bit more detail, really. First one is maybe to yourself, Justin, which is you mentioned life coaching in that divorce period.
Yes.
A lot of people go through divorces, obviously. Not everyone seeks out a life coach. What was it that drove you to actually speak to a life coach in that first place?
So when I was going through the rough patch of my marriage, I actually got the life coach to help me, for lack of a better word, save the marriage. By the time, so I actually got in contact with a lot of different life coaches, and nobody seemed to fit. By the time I found someone that actually fit exactly what I was looking for, we were already going through the divorce, or right at the cusp of it. I don't exactly remember when I started, but anyway, so basically the way I found it was I had that background of mentorship, of mentoring people, and I knew I needed that.
Right.
And so I wanted somebody that specialized in what I was going through. And of course, the only way I knew at the time to find that was Facebook. And so you just start searching, and of course, with Facebook, a ton of stuff comes up, and you got to kind of filter through and figure out what really works for you. And so after talking with probably 5 or 6 different life coaches, I found one that really suited where I was at, where I was going, and what I wanted to accomplish.
Right.
I've talked to other men that have gone through divorces who have not had life coaches, and I can tell you the difference in not only their perspective on life, but also the healing process. Everything that you go through in a divorce, it's tough. It affects you. It affects the kids. It affects your family, extended family, and just the way I was able to process and deal with that. Not that it was easier, but I had the tools at my disposal to deal with it effectively instead of kind of bumping my head against the wall until something else didn't work. I was able to set out a clear path for myself and actually accomplish it. And that's one thing we noticed right away was not only did it help me get through that divorce, it set me up for success in my next relationship with Cresta.
Right. Oh, wonderful. And Cresta, I wanted to follow up on this 911 dispatcher piece because, I liken it a little bit. I know I haven't worked directly with dispatchers in the past, but I know people who have. I liken it a little bit to, I worked in Formula One for a while, and we have what we call mission control, where we've got people who are making the decisions, calling the shots, taking in information and communicating out to others.
Right.
But whilst the drivers and the teams are going out to Australia and Malaysia and all these wonderful places, mission control is just down the road from me here in Woking in the UK in a windowless office. Which is, and with the races being around the world, it's often in the middle of the night. So it's the less glamorous aspect, but still really important.
Yes.
What was that experience like for you as a 911 dispatcher, and what have you taken from that world into what you're doing now?
Wow. So I did it for about 9 years. It's a lot. It's everything from perfectly fine one instant to, I mean, houses blowing up the next instant and 150 phone calls in the next 15, 20 minutes where you're trying to deal with sending people here, sending people there. We didn't just dispatch police, we dispatched fire and medical as well.
Wow.
So in a community of about 80,000 people, we would have 3 dispatchers on duty at a time for those big events.
Right.
I was on duty for everything from, my kid isn't breathing to, I think probably the biggest one was I had one of my officers was shot on duty. It's a lot. I did it. I was single. I came home to my dogs every day. Luckily I had like my parents, my mom was my best friend. But you sign pieces of paper that say, I can't talk about this stuff the way that I would like to talk about this stuff unless it's with my spouse.
Right.
I didn't have one. So I've taken a lot from it. I plan to, at some point create a program specifically for coaching dispatchers who have been through some of that. Dispatchers and possibly, their family members and how to get through some of it in the most positive way possible. So yeah, I've taken a lot from it, and I took him from it too.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, my sister is actually a police officer over in New Zealand, and wow. I know from talking to her about the things she can talk about. It's a job where you have to deal with the stress in the moment and stay professional and keep calm and do the right things, but then it does eat away at you, later on, and builds up over time and all this sort of stuff. So it is, I recognize it is a real, stressful situation, and I think that's probably see some real parallels with marriage as well. You got big hot. Yeah, go on,
the difference between 911 dispatching and marriage, I think, is 911 dispatching you leave at work, you don't bring it.
And then you talked about, you guys met. I know from our previous chats, there's a bit of an interesting story there as well, isn't there? A bit of serendipity to how you guys actually got together. Can you tell us that?
So we both started about the same time. I think Cresta started in dispatch probably 6 months to maybe a year before I did. And when I was doing my training, what they call the the field training officer section after you finish the academy. She was the first dispatcher I met. And so her and I real quickly, because we were both new, we kind of formed a little bit of a friendship. We were acquaintances. So we would talk a lot via like instant messenger. But we rarely saw each other. So we were acquaintances. And then I was out of law enforcement for a while after the divorce, and then she got out, and then we just ended up running into each other one night.
Neither one of us wanted to go do anything. I think that the way that the world and the universe work, it's crazy. It was a Friday, and my mom she just decided she was retiring, and she turned in her letter, and she said, "Hey, let's go to dinner." And I was like, "Well, go to dinner, but I want to go home after that." She's like, "Yeah, no problem." We ran into my brother and his wife. We have dinner, we have a drink. My mom is like, "Okay, well, I guess it's time to leave." And my sister-in-law says, "Let's go to the bar." My mom says, "Okay, let's go to the bar." I said, "I don't want to go to the bar." And my mom said, "I'll see you there." So I ended up there. I
wanted to go home for the night. My brother-in-law wanted to go out. Right. He's got 4 kids, and I kind of felt a little sorry for him. So I was like, "All right, I'll go out with you. I'll give you a break. I know what it's like having kids."
Yeah.
And I was just shooting pool, and we just ran into each other, and
we hadn't seen each other in about a year
and a half.
Year and a half. So it was there were a lot of moving parts to the universe's plans for us, I think.
Oh, wonderful stuff. Lovely story. And bringing on to what you do now, with the Deviation by Design and the Intentional Marriage course, what is it? Who do you help, and how do you help them?
Yeah, so Deviation by Design, we kind of came up with that from a song by Stone Sour, song number 3. They talk about in there, our lives are not how we would have planned them 20 years ago. Our lives have taken a different turn. But what we've come to realize and what we've come to understand and love about our lives is there is some design in it. It's deviation from what we had initially intended, but there is some design in there. And then the Intentional Marriage program is really about taking your marriage and doing things intentional. That's one thing I learned from my coaching is so often too many people just let life take them by surprise, I guess, for lack of a better word. Let life dictate their circumstances. And one thing we established early on is we're not going to do that. We're going to be intentional with everything we do. We came up with that later as we were coming up with our coaching program, but we intentionally did everything in our relationship on purpose. We didn't let circumstances or anything grab us and take us away. And it really started out for us is Friday night date night. So every Friday night, come hell or high water, we're going out on a date.
Right.
Just to spend that time together to kind of unwind from the week and get ready for the weekend. And
sometimes we have to include kids.
Yes.
A couple times we've had to include parents.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just about getting out and breaking outside what we do day in and day out.
Yeah.
So we have what we call like the 1-1-1 principle, 4 1s. So every week we go out on a date. Once a month we go out on a day trip. Doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It can be driving up to the mountain, just getting away.
Right.
Once a quarter, get away for a weekend, and then once a year, take a vacation somewhere together. Again, everybody has different budgets on what they can afford, so it doesn't have to be extravagant, but it's just about breaking outside your norm and reconnecting with each other. And hopefully you're living so it's not reconnecting, it's just building upon that connection with each other.
Yeah. I think that my favorite way to describe intentional marriage is you didn't accidentally get married. So why accidentally live through marriage?
Yeah.
So that's the intentional. Do it on purpose.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, when we're looking at what kind of couples we want to work with, is we want couples who maybe are struggling to find that connection, but who do have a desire to be together. They're just missing each other, and it's not out of anything other than life is just taking them away, and they just need to reset. And we're really here to provide the tools for them to work through their situations together, because all of our courses are specific to the couple. There's not a cookie cutter formula, because everybody's in different situations.
Yep.
Me personally, I travel all the time because I'm a traveling salesman. So, there's going to be couples that have got to deal with the husband or the wife is traveling, Monday through Friday, and they're only home on the weekend. So how are we going to deal with that? There's other couples that, maybe the wife's a stay at home mom and the husband's coming home every night, what we would consider more traditional. And so every couple's going to be a little bit different, but what we're looking for are couples who are wanting to improve their marriage.
Right. Yeah.
Not necessarily save it from a point of almost beyond saving, but definitely improve it, and possibly, the goal always is to make it exceptional.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And that word, there's a couple of words that come up in our conversations. Intentional is definitely one of them, and sort of on purpose.
Yes.
It's doing everything on purpose. Now, the other word I've just written down here is about consistency. That
Yes.
is something that we talk about in all sorts of worlds of helping people perform. Coaches, facilitators, speakers, whatever that might be. That consistent messaging, that consistent approach to your practice. Is really key in terms of making sure that, one, you've got some stability, but two, you've got something to build upon as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Wonderful. And so what should people expect? I know you said there's no cookie cutter, but is there a format to intentional marriage, and does it follow any or have any particular modules that you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we start off everything with understanding where your spouse comes from, because we all grew up in different households. We all grew up with different standards, different beliefs. And so we're attacking life from different perspectives. And one of the first things we like to do is make sure that the couples understand where your spouse is coming from.
And how that can play on your marriage.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Cresta comes from a different background than I do. And so there are times where I'm asking her questions, not out of like she's doing something wrong, but hey, I'm not understanding why you're doing this. Can you explain it to me? Because that's not the way I grew up. That's not the way I have dealt with things in the past. And especially with us being a little bit older when we got married, not only did we have our families that we grew up in, we also had some baggage that we created ourselves as adults that we had to bring in. And so we've had to mesh those together and really learned where the other person is coming from. Because one thing I've learned is we like to judge ourselves by our intentions, but we like to judge everybody else by their actions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's really getting back to, okay, if I'm going to judge myself by my intentions, I really need to do that to everybody else, because I don't think people in general have bad intentions. Sometimes their actions don't really show their true intentions. And so really taking that to your spouse and allowing them to explain their intention, because I know I've done some things where it was well-meaning to Cresta, and she's like, why are you doing that? And so once we, peeled back the layers and understood what the intention was, it was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I think there was one situation where he said something and I just stopped and I looked at him and he's like, what? I'm like, did you just say that to me? Yeah. He's like, oh, that's not what I meant.
Yeah,
I know I've got an example of that where there's been times when the weather, it's pretty cold outside and getting ready to take the kids to school in the morning, and I've gone outside and I've turned the car on and not communicated that I've turned the car on in order to warm it up and to make sure that my wife can go to work comfortably, and yes. It can be taken as you're hurrying me out the door, you're rushing me. Right. So just yeah. that simple thing, trying to do something nice, but not having that communication as to why you're doing it, can really have that a real clash of heads at times, can't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Since you mentioned communication, that is another one of our modules.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing we talk about a lot about in our modules is we all have communication. We all communicate, whether we want to admit it or not. We all communicate.
Yep.
And so it's just changing the tone of our communication and the output of our communication, because we do communicate a lot. And so we just need to, one thing we have found is the more we communicate positivity in our relationship, the better our relationship is. And it's not that there's not going to be hard conversations to have in marriage, because there are, yeah. But how do you communicate those in a positive way, in a way that breeds constructive criticism, if you will, when you need it.
Yeah.
Again, we have modules on, obviously sex. We have modules on parenting, on being a good partner. So one thing Cresta and I do is there are certain topics, probably more so me than her. There are certain topics I struggle talking about. And there are a few topics she struggles with that we need to talk about on a regular basis. So one thing we do is, okay, we need to talk about, let's say, finances today. So the person who struggles with that, we allow them to pick the time and the location that they talk about it. What that does is it gives them a little bit of sense of power in that conversation.
Right.
So, like just this last week, she's like, hey, we need to talk about this. Where do you want to talk about it? And I was like, we're going out to dinner to Chili's and we'll talk about it there. And so just allowing them to have a little bit of power, because they're already going to struggle with it. And so put them in a place where they can talk about it, where they're comfortable talking about it, because there are those subjects that you just need to talk about. We also talk about spirituality, whether you're coming from two different religions, if you're, with the same, just having that spirituality in your relationship, whatever that looks like. And then we also talk about growing together. One thing I do for myself, for my personal growth, is I read three to four books a week.
Right.
I travel a lot, so I have the benefit of sitting in my car listening to a lot of audiobooks.
Right.
But one thing we found is if you're not growing, you're dying. And so we always want to be growing. We always want to be learning, because there's so much information out there to be had that we want to take in as much as we can. And some of that comes back to, we need to be growing together. So if I read something that's interesting, or she reads something that's interesting, we always come back and we share it, and we learn and we grow together.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Fantastic. And maybe that sort of segues nicely into the next part of the questioning, really. You've mentioned about how you help your own performance in one way, and maybe we can elaborate on that a little bit. But maybe, Cresta, what do you do to help up your own game? Are you into audiobooks? Do you have a coach? What do you do?
I don't get the luxury
yes.
of having that kind of time where I'm working in a car where I can listen to audiobooks. I work full time, and I'm also a college student. So, I take college classes that I know are going to benefit the people that we're trying to help, that are going to benefit us in some way, shape, or form. I keep busy. He's gone during the week, so I do stuff around the house. So I have a little bit less of a freer time than he does, but I still go out of my way to make sure that the courses that I'm taking, or when I am tooling around the house, we don't turn the TV on in this house. We have 4 of them. I think between all 4 of them, they get used maybe 2 hours a month.
Wow.
So, and those are usually date nights where it's like, what do you want to do? Oh, let's watch an episode of whatever.
Right.
But yeah, when I'm tooling around the house, I've got some kind of something going on, whether it's an audiobook, a podcast, a Justin. I've got some kind of educational, also my college classes going. Right. So it's the constant bettering, learning, so that we can pass it forward.
Yeah.
And I also think she's missing something huge that she does. We started the 75 Hard Challenge, and so she's working out twice a day. We both are. So we wake up early in the morning. Sometimes it's snowing, sometimes it's 20 below, and we get outside and we do our workout in the morning, and then we do our workout in the evening. And what we have found is that helps you grow as well. It gets your mind in a good place. It gets you thinking clearly. It gets the day off to a right start. It gets that blood pumping.
Yeah.
And that's been huge for us. What we have noticed since we've started doing that is it actually allows us to be more productive during the day. Like, we're exerting more energy, but we're also accomplishing more. And so that's something that we really enjoyed. Obviously, right now I'm hurt, so we're not doing that. But when we were doing that, it was really beneficial to us.
And as soon as we can, we're going to get back to it.
Yeah.
It's weird, because when he first proposed that idea, we live in Casper, Wyoming.
Yeah.
It was negative 25 degrees earlier this week or last week.
Right.
He says, let's do this program. Part of the program is you have to work out twice a day for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
You can't do it at the same time. And one of those workouts has to be outside. I said, and you want to start this when?
And I was just looking this up as well, because I remember having this conversation with you previously, and just realised that -25, you're talking Fahrenheit, don't you?
Yes,
so,
Fahrenheit.
That's -32 degrees Celsius. So that's beyond cold in my mind. That's
and he wants to start working out outside for 45 minutes every day.
Wow.
In that temperature. I said, you're crazy. But one of the things that we do in our relationship is we try to remain open with each other.
Yeah.
I said, and I think I told him he was crazy like 4 or 5 times. I said, well, I'll try it. I'll try it. And then we've come to find that I'm more motivated. I might be more motivated than he is to get up early in the morning and go for that 45-minute walk or shovel the driveway or whatever.
Yeah. And that's the bit I always remind myself. I do fall back occasionally, but any exercise is good exercise, isn't it? It might be that walk to the shops. It might just be. I was washing the car yesterday. And I was like, right, I'm going to use this as a chance to get a bit more exercise, a bit more activity going on. And being outside does make a difference. Maybe -20 Fahrenheit is a whole different ball game. I don't think I'd wash my car in that, to be honest. But there you go. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so slightly different question then. If you could help anyone, any individual or even team or organisation, with the skill set that you've got, who would you want that to be and why?
Ooh, go for it.
You're talking a specific individual, right?
It doesn't have to be, but if you've got someone in mind, go for it.
I think for me specifically, I really want to help. I enjoy helping men who are just struggling, who don't know which way to go. Because I have found so often with the men I talk to, these are good guys that just have never been taught, have never been shown. And I was in the same boat. Like, don't get me wrong, I was in the exact same boat, but who have never been taught how to make their marriage better. One thing I always preach to Cresta, and she always corrects me, but I'm like, everything is the tone in our marriage is set by the things I do. And she's like, no, it's a two-way street.
Right.
But what I've really found is that if the men can get right and do the things and show up in their marriage, things just go so much better. Because women want their Prince Charming. They want their man to show up in the marriage. And so often what I have seen is not that these men don't want to, it's that they don't know how to. So just that type of man is really, because I was there, and because I really have a deep understanding of what they're struggling with. And not only that, but how to get them to the place I am today. That's who I really want to help.
All right. And what about yourself, Cresta?
I've got a couple of different answers for that. I really, I have a couple of friends who are in very negative marriages. I believe every marriage is savable as long as both parties want to save the marriage and want to work for it. But I have friends that are in marriages that are not in that boat, where they would like to save it, but he doesn't, or he wants to save it and she doesn't. So I would love to be able to help women. And it ties in with the other part of who I would like to help is the single ladies that are scared to be single.
Right.
I was single until I was 43 years old. It's scary. How am I going to pay the bills? What is going to happen if this happens? It's all the what ifs. I mean, I feel like I can help them. I know I can help them. We've been on this think and feel thing.
Right.
I can help females know that they are enough on their own, that they don't need a man. I love mine. I also know that I don't have to have him to survive.
Right.
I got that far on my own, and every woman can get that far on their own.
Right.
Oh. those are the kind of people I would really like to help.
Oh, fantastic. And if you were able to sit down and have a drink, have a meal, have a coffee with anyone, I mean, it could be anybody that you know, or anyone famous, or anything like that you believe you could learn from, either for your own marriage or to help others in your endeavours, who would you want that to be?
Ooh.
I'll let you go first this time.
I have no idea. Let's see. I'm lucky in that we both have amazing parents.
Right.
So our parents, and we get to do that. We have a very diverse group of parents. My parents have been married for 48 years.
Right.
His parents were not married for that long. He was young when his parents got divorced. So he's got two sets of parents. Both sets of parents are unique and absolutely amazing. And so like I said, I think we're lucky in that I can learn from and take what we learned from our parents and share that with the people that we are going to be helping.
Wonderful. Justin?
I would say Warren Buffett. I think
Okay.
I think his perspective, not necessarily to gain the wealth he has, because he's just phenomenal in that, but just his approach to entrepreneurship and acquiring businesses, some of the things that he says, I would really like to dig more into.
Right.
One of the things he says is he never bites off more than he can chew, and obviously he can bite off a lot more than I can. But at some point in his life, he only could bite off a certain amount before he was able to take it. And just really to get into that mindset, I think would be extremely beneficial for somebody like me who dreams big and wants really big things, to slow myself down. What can I handle today? What can I accomplish today? It's going to move me forward to that. So I think just that kind of mindset and just really digging into that with him would be phenomenal.
Brilliant. And finally then, how do people find out more? How do they get in touch, and where can we find you?
The best way to find out about us is our website. It's at deviationbydesign.com.
Right.
From there, they can learn more about our intentional marriage program. And if they want to find out more, they're able to book a call with us. And in that call, we do offer a free 30-minute session of coaching just to find out where they are. But that's the best place. We also do have a website, a Facebook page,
right.
And that's facebook.com/intentional marriage coaching.
Right.
So if they go there, they'll be able to pull up our page right away. And that also has our information where you're able to contact us as well.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I would actively encourage people to reach out, seek out those guidances. And I think this is, much like any other endeavour, it's not about waiting until something's broken to try and fix it. It's about recognising when something is even working quite well or really well at the moment. How do you make it even better going forward? And
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, enjoy your happily ever after, and thanks so much for being on today's show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.